All right, I am here. I am no more than 1 minute late, so you sons of bitches can't mess with me anymore. Good day for the Texans. They re-signed Derek Barnett, and we've all been wondering exactly what was going to happen with Derek Barnett because he was a revelation for the Texans. He may have gotten multiple people fired with the Eagles because people thought he was part of the problem for the Eagles. He leaves the Eagles, the defense gets even worse, and meanwhile he just balls out in Houston. So glad to see that that's rewarded, depending on whatever he thinks his definition of a reward is. But that was a guy that did really well in this system. I think it's a really good, really, really good reminder that all of these guys, I would include Mario Edwards Jr. in this, it depends on what scheme they're in. It depends what their coaching is like. Depends on who the guys are around them. And any of these guys could emerge like a Derek Barnett, obviously, and then some guys could not do as well. I do think that when it comes to pass rushing off the edge is pass rushing off the edge. So Danielle Hunter is very unlikely to all of a sudden be bad in any scheme that they put him into. Unless they wanted him to be a 3-4 defensive end, he's going to be just fine. We've got Danielle Hunter highlights that I'm mostly doing over the top of sound bites of his from when he was on with Texans All Access because I want to respond to some of that. We've got Tank Dell updates. Most of you already know the updates, but also he was on Texans All Access last week, which they curiously didn't really put out a lot of this audio. So I wanted to play some of that for you. And if we get to it, Joe Mixon. But to look at Barnett, as many of you are saying, yes, Barnett was a really nice story for the Texans. Like when you talk about sprinkling the D'Amico Ryans pixie dust on people, I feel like Derek Barnett was one of those people. Texans Cap tweeted this out, and it's just a basic rundown. As he says, it's an interesting D-line build for the Texans. Typically in a 4-3, you're going to keep, 10 to up to 12 defensive linemen, depending on how you parcel it all out. They've already got 11 guys right now. If they add some in the draft, I mean, there's going to be pretty heavy competition. And they might add somebody along the way. But just to go from the top down, Danielle Hunter, obviously, game changer, going to be a big deal. Will Anderson, going to continue to improve. I feel very good about that. Derek Barnett, I think, on a short-term deal, even though he's already proven it, it's going to be a consistent state of prove it for a lot of these guys. I feel very good about that. Majai Sanders, 6'5", 248. And I think when Texans Cap is talking about the interesting build, it might be by body weight. Obviously, you go through all these defensive ends, and they've got some sleek, svelte pass rushers amongst those top four. You get down to Dylan Horton, who hopefully just continues to come back from his Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he'll be fine. You guys know how I feel about this. We've been through this now 4 times with the Texans. Just in 4 times in like the past decade with guys who have had cancer. And it's not always so simple that they come back and, hey, you're cleared, you're good to play football. It takes a little while. Quisenberry, it took a couple of years before he was really back into it and ended up being a starter for a few years. So Dylan Horton, Danico Autry, Edwards, that's where you get into these defensive ends who are really more like 3-4 defensive ends. I don't think D'Amico's turning into a 3-4 or anything, but I think he likes the versatility that those guys bring. And then you get into your pure defensive tackles with Fatukasi, Settle, Khalil Davis, Kurt Heinisch. I got to be honest with you. I don't think this is just feeling good in the offseason without having to be tested on it. I feel pretty damn good about the overall competence of that defensive line. Obviously, you've got better guys out on the edge. Danico Autry is a defensive end who can rush inside. So you're concentrated on the outside. They've got enough pluggers at defensive tackle. And, if you think about some of the things Khalil Davis did last year, that I'm not overly worried about it. It does potentially put more stress on the linebackers. So that's the one thing that we'll see. We'll see how that all turns out. But congrats to Derek Barnett. I'm glad that, you're playing a team like Philadelphia where they've just got so many stud pass rushers, and he probably felt like he'd just kind of been marginalized and left out in the lurch. Who knows if he'd gone to another place, maybe that would have been his last stop, but it worked out very well for him here. Danielle Hunter. You guys know how I feel about Danielle Hunter. Very excited about Danielle Hunter. I've been indulging in Danielle Hunter highlights, and I think maybe I didn't really appreciate his tenaciousness and just how much of his game is predicated on hitting a second and a third move. But he was on Texans All Access last week. John Harris and Mark Vandermeer caught up with him. Let's get rid of this. So Danielle Hunter was on Texans All Access with Mark Vandermeer and John Harris. He had some great things to say. I only have the audio, so I'm going to splice the Danielle Hunter highlights over the top of them. I hope this isn't too much. I hope it's not sensory overload. It's hard to listen, but also watch the highlights at the same time. But I trust you guys. You guys are multi-talented. You know the dangers of multitasking, and yet I think that you can handle this. This is Danielle Hunter. First question was simply about the number 99. Remember, we were all wondering, oh, is he going to wear the sacred number 99? We know that he isn't. Here's how he came by that decision. It sounded pretty easy.
It was straight away like, oh man, JJ, he did a lot with that number. He built his legacy for the community and the city of Houston and the Texans. So immediately I knew I was going to touch that number.
Yeah.
Okay. The one interesting thing I thought about that was he's from Katy. So when he talked about doing things for the city of Houston, it hits a little bit closer to Danielle Hunter. I do like that because he's local. It wasn't even a thought in his mind. It was like, I'm not messing with that. He was here too for, peak JJ mystique when Danielle Hunter would have been like in high school or so, or early in his LSU days. Boy, I might be dating myself and how long ago that seems. So no big deal there. They asked him next about where did he learn to rush the passer, his particular style. John Harris made a really good observation about his style, which is that sometimes, like it was with Mario Williams to a certain degree, sometimes it'll look like he's not even in the play, like maybe he's getting washed past the quarterback, but he's got a really good knack for getting his hand in and getting the ball out and making plays. So John just asked him what his influences were and how he came to have that skill.
I feel like it's a big combination of a lot of things. The guys that's been there before me that I've learned from, and you just staying active as a pass rusher. I think that's the biggest thing when you're rushing a passer. You got to stay active. If you're not active, then you're going to be in the net. You're not going to be able to move around a guy or whatever. But the biggest thing is just having technique and just staying active.
Okay. That one was actually easy to pay attention to what he was saying, because that's exactly I'd selected most of those clips for showing just how tenacious he is in hitting multiple moves. This is one of the first things my defensive line coach with the Jaguars, John Pease, ever told me, which is that most sacks in the NFL come on second or third moves. If you have this notion that you're going to be, JJ Watt quick swimming somebody all the time, get rid of it unless you're a physical freak of nature. And even JJ, most of his were on counter moves or second or third moves, or they're, with a scrambling quarterback, gets flushed out. You got to make a move just to separate. Danielle Hunter's very good at that. This is where it gets exciting. This is something that Will Anderson needs to continue to work at. In college, Will had a tendency sometimes to just kind of lock horns and try to turn it into a sumo wrestling match. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. He's working his way out of that. He learned that he had to against NFL-sized offensive tackles. But it's going to be really, really good for him to see Danielle Hunter every day working just that constant kung fu movie, this arsenal of moves over and over and again. And when he says action, it really is. I mean, those guys, the premier pass rushers, they drill everything so much that almost which move you hit is your secondary or third move. You're not thinking about that. It just comes naturally as long as you have that mindset of like, okay, I'm going to hit a move. This is going to be really good for Will Anderson. Getting very excited about this. So next question that they had for Danielle Hunter. Oh, this is John Harris. He has the same thing of Will Anderson. Let's see how the questions differ or are the same. He asked Danielle Hunter whether pass rushing is an art or a science. You might recall that Will Anderson said that on the left side for him, it's art. But on the right side, it's more science because he has to think about it. Here's Danielle Hunter's answer to that same question.
I think it's a combination of both, because science, you got that edge,
Right.
And if you're not by that edge, if you're not doing what you need to do to get by that edge, you're not gonna beat the guy in front of you. So I feel like it's a combination of that, and it's a combination of just bringing your skill, bringing your attributes, your God-given talents. Each guy's different, so there's something that works for each guy that they know that they'll be able to beat a guy with.
Yeah. So, okay, the science, I it was interesting when we started talking about the edge and beating a guy around the edge because that's where the geometry of it comes in. That's another thing that Will got a lot better. And he talked about this at the end of the year is just understanding the angles, understanding just which angle to launch off at, when you need to beat a guy by, like what your landmarks are. And it's one thing that really started to emerge at the end of the season for Will with Danielle Hunter. He's saying it looks like science, but like many things, like musicians or any other high level performers, the things that they're very meticulous about, it's art to us. Like, as I watched Danielle Hunter, I'm like, oh damn, that's art, man. It's just freaking beautiful the way he operates. Will again is going to learn a lot from Danielle Hunter, I think. You guys had some fun yesterday with saying that it sounded like Will was taking a shot at John Grenard when he talked about how he's been waiting for a guy like Danielle Hunter. In fairness to Grenard, I don't think Will was taking a shot at Grenard, but also in fairness to Grenard's still a young pass rusher. Like, Grenard is not come completely into his own. He is not a man in full when it comes to being a polished pass rusher, whereas Danielle Hunter is. And I think that's where it's going to be really, really good for Will Anderson. And you can already hear, too, in Danielle Hunter's voice, he sounds like a mature, older veteran to like Will Anderson, who's just so excited and bushy-tailed and full of verve. It's beautiful. I need to crush it. Last question for Danielle Hunter, and this one came from Mark Vandermeer, was about what his mindset is on game day. Because he sounds like such a mild-mannered guy, right? How does he do all these fierce things on game day?
When I get into the field, the biggest thing, I just feel like I got to defend my land. Like, at my house, I got my house, and then somebody's trying to invade my property. I'm just feeling like, oh, I'll find any way to defend my land, my family, or whatever, my friends. So, just the biggest thing is just, in order to defend my land, I got to make a play, and I got to get to the quarterback.
Yeah. By the way, there too, on some of those hits, that last one, I don't think got flagged. He's got a pretty good neck. This is where it helps being 260 pounds and like a long 260 pounds. I think he can it doesn't look like he's landing on a quarterback hard. So when he tries to push off or roll over, these officials aren't giving him these asinine penalties that other guys are getting. The imagination of defending your land or your house, that's a good one. We've talked about how you got to go water boy as a defensive player sometimes. You got to really imagine that evil things have been done to you or that person was the evildoer. Probably the best ever in the history of football at that was Greg Lloyd, because Greg Lloyd, the linebacker for the Steelers, one time on the field when I was playing with Jacksonville, Keenan McCardle said that Greg Lloyd started yelling at him about Keenan McCardle calling his house and harassing his family. And Keenan was like on the sideline saying this and saying, I've never met this man or his family in his life. I don't know what he's talking about. Luckily, I had read about this and I could tell. I told Keenan, it's just his thing, man. He's just kind of psycho. He just talks himself into this stuff. I don't know. Waterboy wasn't even out yet, but he was going Waterboy on him. So Danielle Hunter pretending to protect his house, that's effective. As far as the defensive line, one of you guys had a question. Okay, as it stands right now on paper, is this defense better than last year's? Very good question. One big problem that they have is that they don't have a second starting cornerback. You've got a starting slot in Des King. You've got a A1 starter in Derek Stingley, but you don't have a starting cornerback to replace Steven Nelson. The thing about that is there's a boatload of guys out there in free agency right now who are basically around Steven Nelson level. Steven Nelson actually in a lot of services is listed as the best free agent available. I think if I had to bet on Steven Nelson versus the field coming back, I might say Steven Nelson at this point. They did the right thing, which is for a guy who'd had a previous contract agitation / insulting the GM on social media, they needed to be sure that he understood he was getting fair value. So he can sit out on the market. He can take whatever offers come and make a judgment for himself whether to come back or not. But I don't think they're going to have to worry about that. And then beyond that, there's, like Xavier Howard's the first name that jumps to mind. But there's a good chunk of guys out there right now that, especially if this defensive front is rushing the passer the way they look on paper, your defensive backs get a lot better immediately. And I think Derek Stingley being healthy and them starting to utilize him towards the end of the season, traveling with the number one receivers, that's going to open up things for the defensive backfield. So I would say on paper right now, yes, Alshire is a better linebacker overall than Blake Cashman is. The Danico Autry is a better like full-time player than a lot of the guys that they had at the edge last year. I mean, Derek Barnett comes back, and then Danielle Hunter's simply just like John Grenard's never had a single year like an average year that Danielle Hunter has. So did I say Derek Barnett? Danielle Hunter. So they're better right now. But they got to fill in a few spots. The defensive tackle position, it's different. I think they've got more stoutness in there against the run. I don't think they have the same penetrating ability. That's the one spot. Obviously, they want to get Eric Armstead in here. That's the one spot at either in the draft or maybe via another free agency acquisition. They need to get better on paper right now. Let's see. Who replaces Perryman? As of right now, it would probably be, Perryman can play all over the place. But it's probably going to be Alshire. Now, Alshire played both Sam and Mike when he was in San Francisco. He was the Sam. Dre Greenlaw got hurt, and he ended up playing a whole lot of Mike. And like D'Amico just really, really likes him. So I think he's going to be the green dot guy. And I don't know. It might be as simple as Henry To'oTo'o. I think Henry To'oTo'o needs a little seasoning. I was like actually kind of surprised at some of the ways in which he struggled last year. Looked like he just had to adjust to the speed of the game and some aspects of the game, and he made some progress. But he's got to take a step forward this year. Yeah, Stephon Gilmore. Thank you, Stephon Gilmore. Not to replace Perryman, obviously, but Stephon Gilmore is one of the defensive backs who's out there. Next one I want to get to, because we've covered Derek Barnett. And thank you for watching, everybody. I'm Seth Payne. I played for the Texans the first 5 years of the Texans' existence, played in the NFL for 10 years. Now I'm on Sports Radio 610 in the mornings from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. with Sean Pendergast. Tank Dell. Let's get to Tank Dell. And I know you guys all know that Aaron Wilson had tweeted this the other day, that Texans wide receiver Tank Dell is off to an encouraging start and a speedy recovery from a broken fibula. Back running with his private coach, Delphonte Diamond. He's way ahead of schedule, hasn't missed a beat. He'll be more than ready when OTAs jump off. Got a little bit of codicil to that coming up. But as far as when Delphonte Diamond tweeted out this video, I thought I had to triple check that this wasn't a video from last year. Remember, there was a video circulating of Tank Dell, and it's actually him from last year. This is Tank Dell looking frankly, obnoxiously fast, doing a bunch of drills that I'd tear 17 groins if I tried to do anything. But a lot of, I'd like to call this the ankle breaker. I would call that the typewriter. I would call this next drill the black and white Wayne Gretzky. Just looking freakishly fast and in ways that, honestly, my first thought when I watched this was, if I didn't know Tank Dell, we're going to get to Nick in a second. If I didn't know Tank Dell, I would think that those moves don't look technically sound. I'm like, good luck there. Good luck trying that in the NFL with your feet so wide apart and everything. And I'll say another thing. Typically, when you see guys with that much motion, it's kind of like Jerry Jeudy, they're not actually getting anything accomplished. It's just a whole bunch of chicanery that good defensive backs don't fall for. The thing with Tank Dell is that he defies physics, and it's really cool to see him with his healed fibula doing that. This is a little bit of a buzzkill before we get to a bunch of Tank Dell sound and highlights, just to remind you of exactly like honestly how freakish he is. It's astounding. And I watched them all last season, as did all of you. And I still like in watching these montages back to back, it's so weird. But here's our friend Nick Cassari, who's having hell of an offseason, reminding us to just maybe pump the brakes a little bit. This is an old thumbnail I used just so you could look at something while he's talking.
Reading, too much into any sort of commentary or what's going on with a player. I would say certainly Tank, he's making progress. And ultimately in the spring, it was about doing what we feel is best for each player. But, Tank's been here every day. Tank's working hard, so he's making progress. So taking it one day at a time. But you're certainly headed in the right direction.
So he says, careful about reading into any reports that you see. And this was right around the time we saw the report from Aaron Wilson that he's ahead of schedule. I think, and I've told you guys this, I think that Tank Dell is probably doing fine and on schedule, but they want to be sure that they take it easy with him. Like Tank Dell completely and totally strikes me as the guy that needs to be protected from himself. He's like the werewolf that needs to be locked up so he doesn't hurt himself or anybody because he wants to be out there. He's got the most congenial chip on his shoulder I've ever seen. Because I think there is something that drives him just in being so much smaller and probably discounted and underestimated his entire life. But he never really lets it show outwardly. He just shows like with that viciousness that when he runs his routes, and when he tries to block dudes on the goal line that I don't think were his guys to block, he's that guy. So he was on with Drew Doherty on Texans All Access, and Drew Doherty did a good job with him. First asked him, how's the offseason going for him? And I added some Tank Dell highlights here for try not to tear a retina watching these.
Yeah, it's been going great. I've been hitting the road full speed, great recovery. I'm giving all the props to our training staff and our strength staff. They've been getting me on the right road, right tracks, and I feel like I'm back ready, man. So, I'm just waiting on, the lights to shine again and us to go out there as a team and go complete the mission. So.
And then that was a touchdown. Sorry, I cut that a little bit earlier. He made it all the way in. Next question: how important is it that the training staff helps out with the mental side of recovery? Not that Tank Dell is struggling with mental health issues or anything, but it's just that long recovery process, setbacks, all of that stuff.
Keeping me motivated, telling me that like me being myself, I already know that I'm gonna come back 100%. I'm gonna come back ready to do what I gotta do to be the best I can be. But them telling me I'm gonna come back 100%, that's just nothing but fuel to the fire, motivation. And, they've been doing a great job, man. From mental, I have, Dylan, DT, I got him with me, so he's been doing a great job with helping me stay mentally focused, mentally locked in, and, knowing I'm going to go through some tough days, some great days, just staying level-headed, never get too high, never get too low. But the mental part, I'm all right with the mental part. I always keep God on my side. I pray every night, go to church, and I'm high on my faith. I stay strong in my faith, so I already know that I'll come back, even stronger, even better.
Okay, I failed. I'm having a hard time paying attention. Did you see what I'm talking about? What the hell, man? Oh my God. Oh, they got to keep this kid healthy. Oh my gosh. It's supernatural. So a couple things there. One was that play against the Bengals when he took those 3 hits as he hit the goal line. And remember too, wasn't it the Bengals game? Yes, it was the Bengals game where earlier he'd almost gotten murdered. Like somebody almost knocked his kidneys through his spine and out his uniform. And he came back in and did that. He's so freaking tough. My God. So there's that. Also at the end there, faith, very important to him. I think that the nice thing about, I think, without speaking for any other players that I don't know much about at all or anything, but I think like CJ and Tank being super, super tight, and like CJ, I'm no teetotaler, okay? CJ doesn't drink or smoke. I don't know what Tank's status is, but I like that he hangs out with CJ so much. As I get older and older, and I knew this at the time, like I would just generally abstain from alcohol during the season as much as possible. And, but still, like the guys that never touch an ounce, there's more of them these days than there used to be. Like, and that's where I get defensive on behalf of Zoomers sometimes, because when it comes to the professional athletes, at least, there are a lot of guys who are just way more. I think there are more guys who are super professional about it than there used to be. They treat it like a science, and CJ's obviously one of those people. I think Tank Dell's one of those people. I think Will Anderson's one of those people. So that part of it is they're doing just fine. Our Zoomers will be just fine. Okay, everybody. If D'Amico yells at one of them, they're not going to go into a shell or something. Next question, and I'll take your guys' questions after we get through here, because you have some very good comments. I can see on my peripheral vision already. Drew Doherty asked Tank Dell about how he feels about Bobby Slowick remaining.
It's been nothing short but amazing, man. Having Coach Slow still our OC, Coach Ben, the receiver coach, he's still here. Coach Jerry, he's still here. Everybody's just still here. Coach Gerard, I mean, everybody's just still here. You know, that's a blessing. You know, just to come back, especially off an injury, come back, and you got the people who trusting in you, and they're gonna also keep trusting in you to stick around and still be with you, even though they could have took higher jobs for themselves, kind of put us first, and stayed around, and it's just gonna be fun. Coming back with them, CJ, everybody, man, we're just gonna go up a notch.
It is really cool that they got to keep not just Bobby Slowick, but Gerard Johnson and everybody else, and Ben McDaniels. Bill Lazor's coming back, as far as I know. So that whole offensive staff that was working with the receivers and the quarterbacks, they get to build on top of last year too. And I don't like to think too far down the road, but hopefully, if Bobby Slowick ever does get another job, my just hope is that they have the running game figured out by then, and that they can keep Chris Strausser, who will also have the running game figured out by then. But then B, that D'Amico's an expert in this system by the end of year 2, which I fully 100% think he's capable of. He's done so many more things already that some quarterbacks never do. I would submit that in some ways, CJ Stroud is more advanced in some aspects of the game than, say, Russell Wilson. And obviously Russell knows a lot more too, that it's going to take time for CJ Stroud to learn. But when it comes to just like understanding how to play within the system, but then also having the judgment to know when to go outside the system. And CJ's talked about this before. I think he said this is the question he would ask quarterbacks if he were interviewing them at the combine, because there's you got to have respect for the structure, but then also understand when to break structure. And it's just one of those things that I think there's so many rookies that don't even have the concept that that's something they need to be aware of. And yet CJ is working at mastering it his rookie year. So that's really cool. I remember Will Levis was on a podcast before the draft last year. Oh, it was Jordan Palmer's podcast. And they were talking to him about, when you're running like all verticals and the defense is in cover 4 or something, like it's a really rough matchup for that you just check down. You're checking down. Don't even think about it. You're checking down. Or just some of the things that you need to do to set up the running back in the passing game. It was kind of opening Will Levis's eyes to a whole different level of game management that it didn't even look like he was even aware of it. And I know for a fact that CJ was more advanced than that coming into the NFL, and he's just been able to build on that. Oh yeah, this is supposed to be about Tank Dell, isn't it? But they're inseparable, these two. Next question that Drew Doherty, the awesome Drew Doherty, had for Tank Dell was that, noted that Tank has been in the city for a few years, having been at Houston, but does he sense that it's more optimistic amongst the fan base these days?
It's been a hell of.
That's not it.
I say for sure that's been a blessing. I don't really call them fans. I call them supporters, man. I love it like that, man. But just me being here at college, not to say anything wrong for the other guys, but people wasn't so much worried about like the Houston Texans, and to see how the guys, me and the guys, the teammates, coaching staff, how we shifted the whole momentum, shifted the whole culture of the program. I mean, not the program, but the organization. It's been a great thing to see, going out in the city, stop at the store and people come up to you like, hey, Tank, what's up? Let me get a picture. And I know CJ got it worse, Will, Sting, Nico, everybody. I know we all feeling that love and getting that love from the city. So that's been a blessing also.
I don't know. Do you think those other guys get it like worse than Tank when he's out and about? Like, Tank's very recognizable. For one, I don't know what his skincare regimen is, and it might just be that he's 22 years old. But I've done thumbnails for all these different players through the year. I never even think of like putting Tank Dell's picture in a filter. At the risk of gushing a little too much about this, this kid's skin is incredible, and I'm not a skin guy. Except that, now I'm 49 years old. I kind of think about it more than I used to. He's like genetically perfect, except for how tiny he is. And I wonder if maybe that's when maybe people don't really like even think to recognize him because maybe they don't realize just how small he is. But he's got a distinct look about him. Go, everybody, recognize Tank Dell more in public if you're not. My God, I wonder if people think it's like Tank Dell's little brother or something because he's got tiny little limbs. It's not just like he's not like Maurice Jones-Drew little. He's tiny, and that's what makes it so impressive that he's so damn tough. Next question from Drew Doherty to Tank Dell is if he's excited about these free agency moves so far.
Oh yes, D-line stack. They've been making some crazy moves on defense. Mixon coming in, man. It's been great, man. So that's for the higher ups. I know they're gonna put the team in place to not only do what we did next year, but go further. The goal in mind, Super Bowl. So Nick and Coach, they're gonna do what they got to do to get us there.
Oh, my God! All right, so did you see like already that one play where he beat a bunch of dudes to the sideline? That's the stuff that you're not supposed to be able to do in the NFL. Like Tank Dell on a jet sweep has got to be terrifying to a defensive back if you're manned up on him, but you also have run responsibilities or what have you, or even if you're in zone and Tank's coming across on a jet sweep or jet motion and you got to change everything. That's where they popularized all this jet motion stuff 10 years ago, and it's gotten to the point now where if they have a slow guy do it, I get like if the Texans have a slow guy do it, I get pissed because everybody can adjust to it. They know it. They've seen it before. Maybe you catch them, maybe you don't. Like with Tank Dell, that tightens sphincters. That little dude does not move the way human beings are supposed to move. And just in all of these highlights that I've seen that we've just shown during these sound bites, he does like 3 or 4 things that usually you tell rookies like, that would have worked in college, but you're not going to get away with it in the NFL. God, I hope his fibula is strong as hell this year. Last question from Drew. It was basically just more of a statement that Tank responded to, which Drew said something like, it doesn't seem like you guys are putting any limitations on yourself.
Nah, never. The sky's the limit. We want to win it all. Last year we wanted to win it all, even when everybody counted us out. And now we know this year people know that we coming with something. They're not kind of doubting us how they did in the previous years. So, going into the offseason, starting way back, we got to prepare way better than what we did. We got to go harder throughout the offseason because it's going to be harder in the season because they know what we can bring to the table now. So everybody going to want to beat the Texans.
Man. I don't know, man. I shouldn't have watched this. I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. That's the Texans averaged 7 points fewer per game without Tank Dell. You go into that playoff game and they were running on fumes in a little bit, and which is what happens when it's a team that's got limited depth. I think right now, depending on whether or not they land, the next would be Keenan Allen. I don't know who that would be right now out there right now. Other than maybe Tyler Boyd, but like that, Tyler Boyd might be like one old guy risk too many for me because it looked like between the injuries and some of the fall off in play last year, I don't know. But if they're looking for a slot, either in free agency or in the draft or via trade, and those guys can stay healthy, that's a scary scenario because that's not like human beings don't move that. Like I don't know how you prepare like for that. That's like preparing for Aroldis Chapman fastball. You're like, oh. Yeah, I'll just dial back in my brain all the other 103-mile-per-hour fastballs I've seen and just go off of that. Like you don't necessarily know how to prepare for Tank Dell and the way he moves like that. So that's good. Let's see. We did Danielle Hunter. We did Tank Dell. I don't know if I want. Let me take some questions from you guys because I've got the Joe Mixon, but I kind of like this adding highlights over the top of the things before we do them, and it just mostly because then I get to watch it over sound bites I already heard. Let me know if you guys think that is it too distracting when I do the highlights over the sound bites? If I have the guy's interview and video, I'll show him, but I like showing the highlights there. All right, questions. Oh, well, first, collagen. I'll tell you what. I take collagen once or twice a day just as like as a replacement for whey protein. Long story, but my body stopped accepting whey protein somewhere along the way. It's one of these things that happens. So I started taking collagen instead of whey protein. And I like, for one, my nails grow like crazy. Like I'm some kind of the like kooky old man or something. So my nails grow like crazy. I don't know if it's helped my skin or my hair at all or not, but it definitely has a difference in some things. My skin does not look like Tank Dell. Frank, I can't moisturize, man. It's too hot. It's too hot. And then I'll get zits. I don't know how to do it all. One time my wife hooked me up and she bought me a bunch of skincare products and I did it for like 3 days. I don't know. All right. He's going to come back stronger. I do like that it was a broken bone. I don't like that he had to break his bone, but it's much better when it's a broken bone with no complications as opposed to obviously, ligaments, tendons. A broken bone in the ankle sometimes can get kind of complicated, or in the foot. So I do think he probably come back stronger, if only to, he doesn't need to bulk up, but I wonder if over the course of just maturing a little bit and, being in an NFL program, if he gains 5 to 10 pounds along the way, I don't think he's going to lose any quickness, and it might help him withstand some of the rigors of the season. The other thing too about last year was early in the season, I can remember Steve Smith Sr. talking about this. He was still, and during training camp, especially for sure, he was learning how to deal with press at the line of scrimmage and how to deal with some physical guys that could get a hand on him. That he was going to have to contend with that. And a lot of his releases and everything, you got to give him a lot of credit that it wasn't as simple as, he showed up and was dominating right away. He could have been the classical guy that, remember, kind of like Braxton Miller. Braxton Miller looked really good in training camp. Then it got to the regular season, and Braxton Miller didn't understand that it was going to be different. That, these guys watch film on you. It could have been like that for a guy like Tank Dell, but like he adjusted to it and overcame all of it. So yeah, he'll definitely be better at the beginning. Okay, what was the reason we lost in Baltimore? What pieces do we need to be better than the Ravens and Bills? What pieces do we need to have a chance? Good question. That's an entire podcast. I would say off the top of my head, interior offensive line was a huge, huge issue in that game. What you have to hope when you look at free agency, you can see, okay, they didn't try to solve that so far in free agency. I think if you trust the process, Juice Scruggs is going to get a shot at center. And I like him as a center much more than I like him as a guard. Sometimes when you watch a center try to play guard, it's not that it's because he's not a good enough athlete or anything else like that. He's just, this dude's a center. He's not a guard. Guard's the big question, whether it's Kenyon Green, Patterson, person to be named later, Kendrick Green, I don't know. And maybe they do end up having to stretch and go for a veteran either via trade or something. But that's obviously the big issue there. As far as wide receiver, having Tank Dell back, having Tank versus Baltimore would have made a difference. Wouldn't have been the difference in the game or anything. Defensively, a better pass rush, better linebacker play in general. I think some people got a little too excited about the fact that Christian Harris was playing well and that Blake Cashman had good PFF grades. Because, look, Christian Harris did come a long way, but he still has to come along more. As far as the linebacking core in general, they were dreadful against play action. They were just so overly eager to play the run a lot of times that sometimes the safeties ended up looking bad because the linebackers were so far out of position. So I give the safeties a little bit more of a break than some people do. So the linebacking core, I think, improved in terms of discipline and football IQ by bringing Alshire instead of Blake Cashman. I like Blake Cashman. I think he's a hell of an athlete. But with a lot of those guys, and if you think about, when Randall Cobb scored that touchdown with the Jets against the Texans, on that play, the way it looked to me was that Denzel Perryman had jumped a route that he shouldn't have, or got distracted by a route that he shouldn't have, and he missed the crosser missed the crosser right in front of him that he could have just easily given a kidney shot. There's a lot of stuff like that all last year that just needs to improve. And if it wasn't Perryman on that play, because you never know for sure, it was a busted coverage. So the other big thing I would tell you, aside from personnel, the mental errors on defense were just unacceptable. And hopefully with one more year in this, they won't make those same mistakes. I know D'Amico would like to be a little bit more complex, but they can't be making those mental errors they did last year. So quite a few things. Also, in terms of like the head-to-head matchup versus the Ravens lost like 6 studs in free agency. So that's one way to get better. Ricky Pearsall, no weapons and no running game. Oh, they're answering this. Yeah. Another receiver. You guys don't think it's distracting to have the highlights over? Okay, good. It's kind of labor intensive for me, but I'm going to find somebody on Fiverr that can do it. This is what I've learned. If you show highlights that are 5 seconds or less long, then they generally will they won't shut down your live stream, and they generally won't dock you on any royalties or anything. So it gets like you gotta cut things down to the relevant 5 seconds. Try THC for my skin. I'd look better. Yeah, I guess so. Beer does that though too. I like to beer goggle myself every now and then. I just like a little bit of like, look at that guy. It's not a second chin. It's a distinguished chin. Is what that is. Moisturize. It's Houston. Yeah, I know. Eat eggs. Okay. For my skin? Now I sound like I'm obsessed with my skin. I'm just mostly impressed with Tank Dell. All right. Hey, thanks for hanging out. Ravens lost 2 starting offensive linemen to free agency. I want to say, Morgan Moses they traded to the Jets, and then was it Stedman or whatever that guy's name is? The Jets having a sneaky impressive free agency because they've added 3 starting offensive linemen. They added Williams. There's another. Oh, they added somebody on defense, but the defense doesn't really need help. I feel like they're making all the right moves. Oh, and they added Tyron. What's his face there? Yeah. I think they're having a good free agency. I do think. I wonder. I'm not all in on Aaron Rodgers conspiracy theories, but I do wonder if sometimes there's like Aaron Rodgers fatigue, to where Aaron Rodgers animosity. I'm not turning this into like a vaccine thing or anything. I think Aaron Rodgers is sometimes hard to handle, whether you agree with him on various topics or not. Aaron Rodgers, and I'm sure I see eye to eye in him on many things, but sometimes he's a bit much. But I don't feel like people should ignore that they're having a productive free agency. Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker, and Braden Fisk. Edgerrin Cooper was a name that Jordan Reed brought up, and he's a badass, man. You Aggies out there know. The one thing about him that I'd love to get D'Amico's true thoughts on him, he's a linebacker out of Texas A&M, is that he's kind of inconsistent, not in his effort, not in his energy, but just with his reads, that he's not really nails on a lot of the run pass cues. Sometimes he takes weird angles, and like Ray Lewis took weird angles sometimes because he could. But in Edgerrin, he's fast. He's like a 4.5 40 guy. I'd be surprised if they don't take a wide receiver. If they stay with those 2 picks in the second round, I think they're going to take a wide receiver with one of them, unless they sign a guy. If they sign a slot receiver or trade for a slot receiver before the draft, then maybe they don't take a wide receiver in the second round. But that's my guess right now. I mean, shoot, they tried to trade for Keenan Allen. That attempt was made after they had already traded back into the second round, was it not? So I think Nick, in his classic like bands of players approach, I think that's what he feels. He just feels like there's a log jam of good players in the second round this year, and not necessarily as many to get excited about in the first round. Adam Schefter said this on ESPN yesterday, that the Texans initiated that trade, that they actually called up the Vikings and asked. I know that shouldn't matter. Nick's been doing this long enough, but there's always still a part of me of like, okay, I hope that the Vikings didn't talk the Texans into this. And if it was the Texans that went to them and said that, then I think Nick's earned my trust for this at least. Yeah, if they have a QB. That's the big thing about the Jets. Yeah, yeah. Aziz takes amazing angles. No, it's not Jordan Reed, the tight end. It's maybe it's something else, Reed. Justin Reed. No, it's not Justin Reed. Yeah, we've had a few Reeds. We've had a few Jay Reeds, have we not? No, it's a different Reed of some sort. Good coaching should do the trick for Cooper. Yeah, I'm always I'm careful about that because from my perspective, you know what I've seen it with is defensive linemen. A lot of times, a guy that doesn't play with his hands or doesn't use his hands effectively in college, you'll hear people say like, "Well, we can teach him that." Like, a lot of guys never pick it up. You know, they've been getting coached as defensive linemen since they were seniors, since they were in high school and in college. But some guys do learn it, some guys don't. I do think that like Cooper's overall, I think he's got good instincts. I think he just needs them to have it refined, and he does. He plays his ass off. Like he's exactly the kind of kid that D'Amico would want. I just think that if you look at the history in San Francisco, they've kind of shuffled guys in and out of the Sam linebacker position and not worried too much about it because you're in nickel and dime most of the time these days. So if Alshire and Christian Harris are playing Mike and Will, I don't think that they necessarily probably feel all that desperate to draft the guy in the second round unless there's somebody they really like right there. And maybe Cooper is that guy, but we'll see. Devondre Sweat. Yeah, I know, man. I know. I loved. We all turn into chubby chasers, don't we, man? We've all got like the fantasy of this monstrous dude that just beats people down like an ogre murdering villagers. And Devondre Sweat does that. Like he murdered a lot of villagers in his time in college football. I don't worry about the scheme fit because I think like right now, if D'Amico's done anything with a lot of these defensive line signings, it's that I think he cares more about whether a guy's a badass than whether they fit the mold. They have enough 3-4 defensive ends right now to run a 3-4. I will tell you that much. They've got at least if Dylan Horton came back, they could have an undersized nose tackle and 2-3-4 defensive ends with Dylan Horton, Danico Autry, and Mario Edwards. It'd be a very undersized nose tackle, but the other two guys are good 3-4 defensive ends. So he likes versatility more than anything. I think Devondre Sweat is not versatile, but he can come in for 20 to 30 snaps a game and be just a royal pain in the ass for people. I also think that there's times when, man, no matter how you're constructed as a team, no matter how much you like pass rushing and everything, it's sometimes you got to stop the run. Sometimes you're losing and the other team's got a good rushing attack and they're just trying to run the ball on you. You need to send a big old T-Von in there. That's what I like to call him. Big old T-Von in there and murder some villagers. I'm going to do, okay. So since you guys seem to be cool. Oh yeah. Thank you. My wife just told me it was a snake plant, which freaks me out a little bit. I don't know. Why do they call it a snake plant? Yeah. They do well inside and they filter air well, or so they say. Okay. I'm going to do the Joe Mixon one tomorrow, I think, because I'm going to get some Joe Mixon highlights and put them on there. And maybe there'll be some more Texans news. I'm excited about Tank Dell. I'm really excited about Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter and the effect he's going to have on Will Anderson is I don't think you can underestimate that. I think Will is just a sponge who loves to soak up information, and Danielle Hunter has a lot of information to give, and it's going to be really cool. That part of it's going to be really cool. There'll be bumps along the way. There'll be, enemies will become friends, friends will become enemies. I'm going to flip out on somebody at some point on a live stream. I've done a better job of staying even keeled on the radio. Really, about 3 years ago when I realized I was probably going to die if I started kept freaking out like that, all that. So likewise on the live stream, because of the shape and sharp margins of its leaves that resemble snakes. Okay, cool. Okay, Colby. Maybe you can give us a live of the potential prospects for the Texans. That would be cool. Yes, I very much want to do that. You know what I have a hard time with, and I just got to rip it off and just go with it, is, man, as you guys know, I can ramble. And when you start talking about these college prospects, my God, I mean, you could write a book on each one of them. I don't know. I know Lance has talked about this, Lance Zierlein, that they've asked him to start reducing the number of bullet points he has on his prospects, and I think it's got to drive Lance crazy because he's so thorough. He's doing all the work and he wants to put it all down there, but now they want it down to like the 4 or 5 most important points. Other thing that I realized, I was going through an old Nolan Naraki scouting report on Aaron Donald. Nolan Naraki had projected. So, for those of you who remember, Nolan Naraki was the guy that used to write draft write-ups for, I think one was Pro Football Weekly, and then he was working for NFL.com. But he would also he would print the stuff that nobody else would print, some of the anonymous scouts and everything, and it got to be a little bit of an issue. Like, honestly, he was kind of accurate about a lot of the guys, like Johnny Manziel. But anyway, I'm looking over this old scouting report that projected Aaron Donald as a 4th to 5th round pick. Maybe it was 3rd to 4th round pick because he was undersized and he gets swallowed up versus double teams and everything. It was Nolan Naraki at NFL.com. Then I realized that Nolan Naraki had the job that Lance now does. So I think I got to talk to Lance about this. I can't remember the timing, but I think they must have booted Nolan Naraki because of all the heat that he would generate, and they brought in Lance, and then Lance has been a fixture ever since. So I'm glad. I'm glad that Nolan Naraki was. I'm glad that Nolan Naraki was irresponsible. Be like Landry and send them to timeout for 5 minutes. Who does he send to timeout? Gonna picture snakes. That's the price of clean air. Nightmares about snakes. I'm breathing fine. The whole point of live streaming is rambling. You know what, Frobius? And I'm glad to see you again, Frobius. Let me power rank my experiences on various social medias through the years. Dead last, Facebook. I don't want to know the things that I know about some of the people that I don't even want to know anymore, like I do now because of Facebook. So I'm rarely on there. Next to last from Facebook, I suppose, would be Snapchat, just because I never really spent much time there. I would throw a MySpace in there just because that was coming in just as I was retiring from football. And that was in the wild west days of social media, when I know I had a bunch of teammates who basically people would put stuff on Snapchat. I think it happened to Dante Robinson. Basically, like, they were advertising a party that Dante Robinson was hosting, and he'd never heard of this party or the people putting it on or anything. Like, it was crazy, wild. So that kept me off of MySpace, thank God. And but then I would go Instagram. No, I would go Twitter, because Twitter's been really good to me, but it's just so damn cynical and negative. And it rewards that. And then it rewarded me being cynical and negative and snarky. I'm so good at being snarky when I just really let my snark flag fly. And it's not good for me. It turns you into a snarky asshole. And and it was rewarding me for that. So I had to curtail my Twitter use, X.com use. And this isn't an Eli Musk thing or anything. This is well before he took over. And then I would say, like, so far I've liked YouTube the most. And maybe that's a bad thing because it's obviously a lot more one way. But now that I'm doing the live streams, I get to make it more two-way. People that say something stupid. What's the same? Same what? Oh, I don't know. That's the price of clean air. The only thing is that I don't keep up with. Oh, okay. When Landry doesn't agree with a chat or thinks it's stupid, he sends them to timeout. On live, does he do that on his live streams? Somebody's been blocking Bubba Homeschool on the Sports Radio 610 live stream, and we don't know who or why. And Bubba Homeschool's never been an issue for me. I'd be like, Bubba, are you here right now? Usually you would have weighed in already. I don't know. I don't know why. What Bubba, like? I don't know why Bubba Homeschool. Does Bubba Homeschool agitate more than I realize? I've always found him to be pleasant. Maybe it's somebody who's anti-homeschool. Hold on a second. My wife is going to text me. Okay, we're good. I'm cooking tonight, so I wanted to be sure she wasn't going to be home yet. MySpace got wild. That was my high school years. MySpace was amazing for bands. That's what I remember about that. And MySpace supposedly made a resurgence at some point. Bubba, cool as hell. Thank you. Yeah, I like Bubba. Bubba responded to something said one day, and Landry thought his response was him saying the same thing. Is Landry the one that keeps blocking Bubba off? I don't think Landry's on the Sports Radio 610 live stream during the show. I got to be more on the Sports Radio 610 live stream. The one thing that I've learned about YouTube and why I like it is it does, for one, it's long form. Like, so you don't end up arguing with other people based on just little snippets of information. Two, but I mean, the downside, boy, I'm a jerk. My favorite social media, as I just listed, is the one which is very much one way. It's me talking into a camera, and if I choose to, I can ignore everybody else. That's why I like YouTube. Oh, Reddit. Reddit's going to be the one. That's my new one. Sean and I are both going to start going to Reddit more often because it's very good at basically like curating interesting stuff. And then a lot of just like on the YouTube stream, I think there's better comments and sometimes more astute comments. Reddit, I think that some of the cream rises to the top instead of like the dirt bags rising to the top. At least that's been my experience. So Landry will put people in the we'll put them in timeout. I don't even know how to do that. It's a real problem because honestly, Joe Mixon will block. Okay. Texan subreddit is quality. I think that I really try hard not to ever block anybody on the text line on the station because it's not individualized. So like somebody might hate me and say a bunch of nasty stuff to me on the text line. But if I block that person, then like everybody else who might have good discourse with that guy doesn't get to see it. So like likewise on YouTube, I gotta ask guys to maybe like if they block somebody, unblock them because I've never had an issue with Bubba Homeschool at all. And I don't know if it was Landry that was doing it. Reddit is good, but it rehashes Twitter. I don't know, but I kind of like that. Sometimes it's just Twitter does such a good job of putting the comment that's going to agitate you most right at the top. They know it. Like they know it. Their algorithm, I'm convinced of it, unless I'm just that prone to negativity. But like before I started being really now on Twitter, like if it's somebody I don't know or whatever, I'll mute people a lot. The algorithm seems to take note of that, and my timeline's cleaned up a lot better. But man, for the most part, it's almost like I feel like it's almost guaranteed that the first comment after something that you find interesting is somebody who like diametrically disagrees with you or and does it in the dumbest possible way. I'm fully willing to admit that there are super intelligent people who have different opinions than mine, and that even though they're wrong, they are intelligent people. But now my wife's way more intelligent than me. I told her that the food was going to be ready. I got to go. I'll have Joe Mixon with highlights tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Like, subscribe, talk about it on the Texans subreddit and get them to subscribe. Thank you, everybody.